Rachel, a sharp and successful marketing executive, thrived on structure. Her life was a series of perfectly timed meetings, high-stakes campaigns, and carefully planned workouts. Her coworker Sundar was a fixture in the periphery of her professional life, quiet, competent in IT, and entirely unremarkable. At first, the coincidences were dismissible. Seeing him at her usual cafe across town, running into him at the esoteric bookstore she frequented only once a month. She chalked it up to the small-town feel of a big city, dismissing the tiny prickle of unease as stress. The coincidences, however, didn't stop. They mutated into patterns. She began noticing him at her subway stop at 7:48 a.m., even when she intentionally left 5 minutes earlier or later. She started testing him subtly. One morning, she took a detour 3 blocks out of her way to visit a specific hidden vintage clothing store. 2 hours later, scrolling through LinkedIn, she saw a photo Sundar had posted, a blurry, close-up image of a building facade, captioned only, "Exploring New Corners." It was the shop. The hairs on the back of her neck rose, transforming that faint prickle of unease into a persistent, low-grade dread. Then came the specific details. She had recently switched from black coffee to a custom order, a double-shot caramel macchiato with almond milk and a sprinkle of cinnamon. It was an obscure, expensive change she had never mentioned at the office. One morning, Sundar was waiting for the elevator, holding the exact same complicated drink. When she questioned it, he merely offered a smooth, practiced smile and said, "It was a recommendation. Good timing, right?" The air between them suddenly felt charged, the shared space of the elevator claustrophobic. Later, she posted an old photo of herself on a throwback Thursday with her college friends. The caption referenced her nickname, Ray, a name she hadn't used in over a decade. The very next day, a package arrived at her desk, anonymous, containing a small antique music box. Attached was a note written in precise looping handwriting. "I hope Ray likes this." The professional, well-ordered walls of Rachel's life were crumbling under the weight of his invisible presence. She found herself actively altering her routines, checking her reflection in shop windows and double-bolting her door. The executive suite had become a cage. Her sleep was fragmented, haunted by the feeling of unseen eyes tracking her every private moment. She started speaking in vague terms at home, avoiding specifics about her weekend plans even to her close friends, terrified that anything she uttered might somehow reach his ears. The ultimate breakthrough came during a casual team lunch. Rachel mentioned a minor disagreement she'd had with her mother the night before over her retirement plans. It was a fleeting general comment. Sundar, sitting silently at the end of the table, suddenly chimed in with a specific detail about her mother's concerns regarding the yield of a specific long-term CD, a detail Rachel had only confided in a private, encrypted email to her financial advisor 2 days prior. Rachel froze, the fork halfway to her mouth. The sheer audacity of the information, the specific dollar amounts tied to her mother's security, was terrifying. Sundar simply offered a bland, "Oh, I heard you talking about it earlier." But Rachel hadn't spoken to anyone in the office about it, let alone within earshot of Sundar. The simple denial, the smooth, blank face confirmed her deepest fear. This was not coincidence. This was systematic, sophisticated surveillance. Her fear turned into a cold, hard determination. That night, Rachel couldn't face the isolation of her apartment. She stayed in her office long after the security team had made their final rounds, the high-rise office feeling eerily quiet and expansive. She was an executive, not a tech expert, but she instinctively knew where to look for irregularities. She logged into her company laptop, her fingers flying across the keys, cold sweat prickling her brow. The turn came one frantic late night. She began reviewing her network activity, diving into arcane logs that most employees never touched. She contacted an old classmate, a cybersecurity specialist, under the pretense of a corporate audit, gaining insight into how to hunt for anomalies. She noticed a suspicious, repeated login attempt on her secondary email account, the one she used for obscure subscriptions, from an unrecognized IP address traced to a residential proxy server. It led her down a rabbit hole of digital breadcrumbs. What she uncovered was breathtaking in its scope and audacity. Sundar hadn't just been guessing, he had been living in her shadow. The IP was a dead end, but the timing was critical. She then checked the logs for her work-issued phone. something she had never thought to do. There it was, a third-party app with elevated permissions installed months ago, cleverly disguised as a routine system update. This was the source of his real-time tracking. This was the keylogger. The application had disguised itself as a battery optimization service, a clever trick that allowed it to bypass most corporate security sweeps. When she analyzed the data packets this rogue application had transmitted, she found a mirror image of her digital life. Sundar had successfully installed monitoring software on her work-issued phone and had then used the information gleaned, passwords, personal security questions, and even voice samples, to brute force the password to her oldest, most vulnerable personal email account. From there, he gained entry to her cloud storage. She saw logs of him downloading years of private correspondence, including sensitive performance reviews, deep financial data, and even the complete archived history of her dating apps. Most chillingly, she saw evidence of files he had accessed, a folder labeled Rachel's True History, containing intimate conversations with her partner, her medical records from a minor surgery 2 years ago, and photos she had thought were safely deleted. The revelation was a hammer blow. The man was not just a coworker. He was a digital stalker operating within her walls, harvesting her soul. The psychological strain was immense. She felt violated, stripped bare, and completely alone. She considered calling the police immediately, but the thought of the ensuing professional chaos and the required disclosure of her private life paralyzed her. The company would have a massive liability crisis, and she would be the central figure in a media circus. She decided she needed to gather more conclusive evidence, something that HR couldn't possibly dismiss. She spent the next day working remotely, building a comprehensive, 50-page case file of his digital trespasses, documenting IP addresses, file access timestamps, and the specific unauthorized app permissions. This was a professional war, and Rachel was armed with data. The danger escalated into a physical threat during a mandatory off-site networking event held at a downtown hotel. Rachel, cautious and tense, had checked her surroundings repeatedly. She wore a dress with pockets, keeping her emergency personal alarm within easy reach. But Sundar was waiting. He had bypassed the main floor and cornered her in a quiet hallway near the restrooms, his face no longer placid but strained, contorted by a desperate, heartbreaking intensity. "You saw it, Rachel. You saw the truth," he whispered, his eyes wide, bright with a manic certainty that terrified her. "I know what you are, what you're trying to hide. You're like her, you know?" She promised she'd never leave. She promised she'd understand. He took a step closer, closing the distance, forcing her back against the cool marble wall. "You found the logs, didn't you? You know everything. That's why I need you to listen." The twist hit Rachel with horrifying clarity, momentarily cooling her rage with profound pity. Sundar's obsession was rooted in a deep past trauma. He revealed in a rush of desperate, disjointed words that he had been abandoned by a loved one years ago, his fiancée, who had simply vanished after a personal crisis, leaving him with a crippling sense of unworthiness and betrayal. But it was deeper than just the fiancé. He spoke of a childhood marked by an emotionally absent father and a mother who constantly threatened to leave, creating a lifelong fear of being unanchored. "I had to watch you, Rachel. Your life is so clean, so ordered. I thought if I knew every flaw, every fear, every single stupid purchase, I could finally see past the exterior. I could see the chaos inside you, the thing that makes you real, the thing that would make you understand me," he confessed, tears tracking paths down his strained face. "You were the only one who didn't threaten to go. By knowing you completely, I was creating a connection that couldn't be broken. I believed that by watching you, by consuming every detail of her life, you would become the only person capable of understanding my pain." His stalking wasn't romantic. It was a frenzied, narcissistic attempt to create a perfect, non-abandoning surrogate. "Don't you see? We're connected, Rachel. I know the real you. I know you argue with your sister. I know you regret quitting piano. I know your mother's banking details. I need you to stay. You can't leave me like she did." His behavior was becoming increasingly erratic. He reached out, his hand shaking to touch her face, but then his grip tightened on her arm, hard and demanding. "You're the only anchor I have left." Rachel feared for her safety. His desperation had moved beyond creepy surveillance and into genuine physical threat. This was no longer an HR issue. It was a matter of survival. Rachel remained outwardly calm, masking her terror with the professional composure that had served her well in the boardroom. She was trained to handle high-pressure negotiation. "Let go of me, Sundar," she commanded, her voice steady, low and laced with absolute authority. He recoiled slightly, momentarily stunned by the sudden executive tone. It was just enough. Rachel wrenched her arm free, pivoting sharply. She activated her personal alarm, a screeching, high-pitched noise that immediately shattered the quiet of the hallway. She raced back to the main reception area, where the music and chatter immediately ceased, drawing all eyes to her and the still shaking Sundar. She yelled for security and then immediately called Detective Miller, the officer who handled the company's regional security liaison. The following morning, Rachel did not go to her office. She went straight to the police precinct and then directly to the HR department, accompanied by a corporate attorney who had been alerted by Marcus, her agent. The case she presented was airtight. To the police, she provided the technical evidence of the hack, the login data, the location services history that proved Sundar had tracked her, and the undeniable logs of the spyware on her corporate phone. Detective Miller took the case seriously, treating the digital penetration as a significant violation of privacy and the hallway confrontation as an aggravated threat. To HR, she presented a detailed timeline of his escalating behavior and the explicit details of his confrontation, emphasizing the fear for her physical safety and the massive liability his actions created for the company due to the data breach. The legal implications of an IT employee using corporate assets to stalk an executive were immense. The company acted swiftly and decisively. Sundar was immediately placed on administrative leave pending investigation and was subsequently fired for gross misconduct, violation of corporate IT policy, and harassment. The local authorities, backed by Rachel's undeniable evidence, issued a highly restrictive restraining order that forbade him from contacting Rachel or coming within 1,000 feet of her home or workplace. Recognizing the acute mental health crisis fueling his actions, the police also mandated that Sundar seek immediate, long-term therapy sessions to address his mental health crisis and the root trauma of his abandonment issues. The threat was neutralized legally and professionally, but the cleanup had only just begun. Rachel's partner, her sister, and her mother all had to deal with the sickening realization of having been digitally observed and manipulated. It took weeks of raw, difficult conversations to restore trust, to explain that the angry DMs or the suspicious comments were not from her. Rachel had to face a complete digital cleansing, changing every password, every security question, and consulting with a digital forensics team to ensure every trace of the keylogger was gone. The professional fallout was also significant. While the company supported her, the breach of security and the restraining order became office whispers, forcing her to endure endless speculative pity. For Rachel, the crisis was an opportunity to drastically reprioritize. The temporary breach of her privacy served as a permanent lesson in vulnerability. She took a month off work, not to vacation, but to fundamentally reset her relationship with the digital world. She deleted old cloud accounts, implemented two-factor authentication on every platform, and bought a separate, non-networked burner phone for truly private communications. She even underwent a short course of trauma counseling herself, recognizing the toll the constant surveillance had taken on her nervous system. More importantly, she started taking self-defense classes, not just for the physical skills, but to reclaim the sense of physical and psychological agency that Sundar had stolen. Learning to draw a hard physical boundary was the final, necessary step in healing the digital violation. Her self-defense instructor emphasized situational awareness, a concept Rachel now internalized far beyond any corporate security seminar. Months later, Rachel returned to the marketing world stronger, quieter, and infinitely more discerning. Her life was structured not by external success, but by internal boundaries. Her colleagues found her a little harder to read, her phone always face down, her social media presence slightly dimmer, but professionally, she was sharper than ever. She had learned that the line between professional conduct and dangerous obsession could be terrifyingly thin, and that true safety began not with an antivirus program, but with a firm, unyielding commitment to her own well-being. She had dismantled the threat and in the process rebuilt her foundation in steel, ready to face the world with renewed strength.